Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's once again 9 o'clock. I don't know how I find that to be the case. July 25th, 2025, a big 25 day. No strange national holidays that go along with that, as far as I am aware. But I did happen to see, as we mentioned yesterday, being Pioneer Day out in Utah, that there was a protest sign out over one of the highways, that they made use of that and reminding everybody about the subject of immigration, the very touchy subject of immigration, and basically pleading with everybody to take care that they welcome their migrants. And remember that the pioneers were refugees. That was an interesting angle on migration issues. I don't know if I can find that one now. I got wrapped up in trying to read about the Japanese trade agreement because I saw some critique of it yesterday and discussion of it this morning. And, worrisome as usual with all the trade deals here. I've been watching Justin Wolfers track the trade deals as they don't happen, and then watch him give a very interesting but not entirely transparent to non-economists, I guess, explanation that it's still difficult to wrestle with. But it was an interesting, I guess, venture into the macroeconomics of this one part of the deal, which had to do with rice imports. It was just very interesting to watch this thing break and watch the stock markets internationally react with the usual, the predictable, I guess what they were describing in the newspapers as relief at seeing this deal reached. But once again, it turns out that the deal isn't necessarily exactly what American Trump officials went on television and announced, or at least it's not the Japanese understanding that's exactly what they announced, but they got the stock market bump that they wanted out of it anyway, and it's beginning to look like a lot of these deals are being announced for the purpose of letting insiders know that there's going to be a deal announced so they can run in and buy while the market's down, enjoy the spike that comes with the announcement of a deal, and then quickly sell before it becomes apparent that the deal isn't a deal, or the deal is falling apart, or the deal is just a deal to strike a deal later, these sorts of things. This caught my eye. Carl Quintanilla reporting this morning, and I guess I'll have to park this in Instapaper so that I can share the Blue Sky post with you. And I put down the link that he used from the Japan Times, but the somewhat worrying quote here that, the Japanese chief negotiator, which means, of course, trying to read a Japanese name first thing in the morning, right out of the box, Ryosei Akazawa. It's my best attempt at that one, in reading the anglicized Japanese here. He's the chief negotiator in this latest round, and said that after returning to Tokyo on Thursday that he had, quote, no recollection, unquote, of discussing with U.S. officials what Bessent said on TV. So Scott Bessent must have taken to the air and described the trade deal. It wouldn't surprise me if it was erroneous in the description. That would be the generous way of saying it. Or once again, it could be just, we said what we thought would sound good on television, and we don't care whether the Japanese think that's the agreement or not. Or sometimes I think the play seems to be, you get an agreement for, let's say, half of, $500 billion in investment in the United States. They go back to Japan. He goes on TV and says, we have an agreement for $1 trillion in investment from Japan. And then they go and dispute that. I don't know. Anyway, that's not really where I wanted to start, the morning's news necessarily, but it's what happened nonetheless. I wonder if I can find that. This is probably too long ago now that I think about it. I should have put aside that nice photo of the protest over the highways just because it was such an interesting message. And yeah, I don't know if there was text that's searchable along with the picture too. That would have made it easy. Oh well. Anyway, it seems like just yesterday that we were talking about it being Pioneer Day, and it seems like just yesterday that we were saying, oh yeah, great, no more. We should just stop with the Jeffrey Epstein thing at this point, right? No, of course not. We haven't been saying that at all. However, I do note also, I see this tallied up in the mornings. Fox News doing their utmost and the conservative outlets doing their utmost to minimize it. And people were posting for our review the number of mentions during, let's say, primetime morning hours on Fox News of Obama, 15, 25, 30 mentions of Obama's name, and 5 mentions of Epstein's name. Things like that. So they're doing their best to try and minimize it. And I guess we can, we'll see how the results go. All right, let's see. Let me open up what we've got here and get ready to share what's been stored in Instapaper. Although, maybe just as a public service and to keep an eye on international trade, because I brought the subject up, we can take a look at that report. I'm curious too, and I was trying to scan it before the show just to see how egregious was the discrepancy between what Scott Bessent said on television, I guess, and what the Japanese remember. And, are we showing signs of the same sort of market manipulation for this agreement, which would be, what are we talking about? I think this is like the 4th or 5th possible agreement, or things that they classify as agreements, even if they aren't agreements. And as we had noted, Justin Wolfers had said there's only like 25 countries had even gotten the letters. And he was pointing out in his television appearance just the other day that remember, they ended up being literally mail merge letters. They all said the same thing. They just swapped the names of the countries and the numbers for trade deficits, up to and including sending letters to countries like Brazil, with whom we do not have a trade deficit, but just claiming that we did, but putting a different number in. They did change the number. So what's going on with Japan, who's not really a huge trading partner of ours, right? Okay. Big unanswered questions follow Japan's big, beautiful deal with the U.S. This is the Japan Times borrowing the big, beautiful framing from Donald Trump and slapping it onto the trade agreement. All right. And nothing like picking up the Japan Times and reading the thing and noticing that they have, their trending news stories on the right side gutter, as it were, of their front page. And it's always fun to see sumo wrestling as part of the daily news. That's nice. What's up in sumo world? Disappointing start to Nagoya tournament turns into fascinating final stretch for all the sumo fans out there. But you probably already know that. And you got up earlier than we did if you're a big sumo fan in Japan. All right. So Francis Tang writes this thing for the Japan Times. What's going on trade-wise? While the surprise 11th hour trade agreement between Japan and the United States gave the markets reason to cheer after months of anxiety, and that's, I think, what the play is here, uncertainty remains. I can't believe it. With the fine print of the deal and the implementation of certain pledges in focus, a massive and unprecedented $550 billion investment plan, in particular, is the subject of doubt and discussion. Officials in both countries offered more details the day after the world learned the basics and broad outline of what was agreed to in Washington on Tuesday, but many questions were left unanswered. Even an 847-word fact sheet issued by the White House on Wednesday seemed to be missing some heft. They need at least 850 words to lie about this. The U.S.-Japan agreement struck just days after Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's ruling coalition suffered an electoral defeat in the upper house election, or in an upper house election. Okay. Sliced U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff on vehicles in half to 12.5%. The quote-unquote reciprocal tariff on most Japanese products will be 15%, the best deal that a trade surplus country has managed to achieve by negotiating with Washington. That's interesting. Japan also received a promise from the U.S. that for strategically important goods, such as semiconductors and pharmaceutical products, things that Donald Trump is sensitive on price, tariffs for Japan there will always match the best rate charged to other countries. So, leaning back on the old practice before Trump decided to manipulate tariffs unilaterally and at a whim, the old most favored nation status, essentially. In exchange, Japan agreed to waive additional safety tests on U.S.-made cars, increase American rice imports under an existing tariff-free framework, and again, existing tariff-free framework, right? So why? All right. Anyway, and cooperate with the U.S. in strengthening supply chains through Japanese investment. But the most important of all was arguably its promise to invest up to $550 billion in key industries and technologies in the United States, while the White House said the amount of investment could exceed that number. And I guess that's where Bessent came in. Is it up to $550 billion or straight up $550 billion? Asked Paul Sracek, an adjunct fellow at the Hudson Institute. And does investment that's already taken place count? It would if Trump were, if Trump were Japanese, of course. He would then be saying, oh, yeah, right. Or all that we invested already, that counts. I think that's since that was apparently the math he was using to criticize Fed Board of Governors Chair Powell yesterday. Everyone watched that video of the two of them touring the construction, I guess, of the Fed's new building, which Trump was hoping to use as an excuse, cost overruns there, hoping to use as an excuse to fire Powell. And Powell fired back in the middle of the press availability, disputing Trump's numbers and pointing out that your numbers for the cost overruns, the alleged cost overruns in this construction, include the cost of constructing a totally different building that was finished 5 years ago and has been in use for 5 years. But what the hell? Let's just throw it in there. So, okay. So legitimate question from Paul Sracek in the Hudson Institute. Is this up to 550? Is it straight up? You must invest 550 on the nose, or at least 550? And does investment that's already taken place count? For example, the SoftBank promise or Nippon Steel, are those part of that, right? Didn't Nippon Steel bought U.S. Steel, right? Fantastic deal, I guess. I don't know whether we're supposed to be happy about that one or not. The time frame for the investments is left undefined. Private companies cannot be forced by their governments to make investments, and it's unclear whether what has been agreed to is actually enforceable, he noted. But of course, this is an American speaking. I don't know what you can and can't force people to do in the Japanese system, but presumably it's as much free market oriented as ours in terms of centralized direction of the economy. But you can't be sure. Other people work under completely different rules. But I was wondering about that yesterday with the rice situation. Anyway, these are promises into the future, Sracek said. People don't remember 2 or 3 years later that there was a promise made, and they go back and sort of calculate this and say, well, did you really hit $550 billion, or was it only $400 billion? That's a good point, too, and I think that's probably the case with almost all such agreements, not just Trump agreements. But given that fact, and that there's that fudge factor kind of built into these sorts of agreements, if the ordinary agreement from a president and prime minister bargaining in good faith has a pretty significant fudge factor in it, you can't count on getting $550 billion out of this agreement if you can't get it out of any agreement. All right. Okay, back to the Japanese news names here. Takahide Kiyuchi. How about that? Executive economist at Nomura Research Institute wrote on a Wednesday report that the $550 billion figure lacks foundation and is, quote, little more than a verbal commitment. Wow. Well, Only took him 6 months to get to that verbal commitment. Investments in the United States is ultimately a decision for Japanese companies to make, and the $550 billion figure is merely a government target, he wrote. In reality, under the Trump administration, many Japanese firms likely perceived a deterioration in the business environment due to measures such as tariffs. U.S. negotiators elaborated on Japan's role in the investment mechanism in two Bloomberg TV interviews on Wednesday. The U.S. will operate the projects and retain 90% of the profit generated by them, said Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. That does sound like the sort of thing you might question when you get back to Japan. The deal is you will give American companies $550 billion to invest, and 90% of the profit from that $550 billion investment will stay here in America with American firms. Deal? I think probably no deal. The Japanese are going to give America the ability to choose the projects, decide the projects, and execute the projects, he said. He noted that the framework was his idea back in January. So Lutnick wants to get the credit. That's not going to go well with Trump, but it doesn't surprise me. If you ask me what would Lutnick's plan be, the plan would be people who have money will give it all to me or us and let us decide what to do with it and then keep all the profit. That is a fantastic deal. The Japanese are the financier. They're the banker. They're not the operator, he said. Oh, that's interesting, because usually the financier gets the 90%. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, this is what I wanted to know, cited the investment proposal, which will be carried out with, quote, all new capital, unquote, as the deciding factor behind Japan's success in striking a deal with the Trump administration after months of brinksmanship and fruitless talks. That is a different kind of deal because the Japanese proposed a very innovative solution, Bessent said. They came to us with the idea of a Japan-U.S. partnership where they are going to provide equity, credit, guarantee, and funding for major projects in the U.S. Now we hearken back to where the Hudson Institute economists, and Hudson Institute, not a liberal organization, pointed out you can't really count on the idea. Not only can you not count on the dollar figure, but presumably in the Japanese system, it's very much similar to here in the United States. The government saying we have a goal of having Japanese firms make these investments is one thing, although it's not necessarily a thing they ought to be saying. But can they actually make that happen? Well, they can use various mechanisms to twist arms, I guess. There are tax breaks for Japanese companies that make investments that would count toward fulfilling this obligation. There's that. Here in the United States, of course, it would be more along the lines of, we're going to get rid of your company and make sure you can't do business. We're going to pull your business license until unless you participate in this. So, maybe they have a similar kind of leverage. I don't know. But I think what he's pointing out here is two countries said, wouldn't it be great if we could make people in our country invest in your country? I guess so. Okay. Let's do that. Okay. We'll see what we can do. For Japan, the concern now is whether the Trump administration will come back for more. Notably absent from the deal were agreements on defense spending and exchange rate targets, issues that Trump has previously linked to trade policy. In an interview on Fox News, Bessent warned that if Japan fails to live up to its commitments, and we'll never know whether they did or didn't, and you can certainly always claim that they didn't and then try to force something new out of them, right? If Japan fails to live up to its commitments, the tariff rate could easily be taken to 25%, just where it was according to the letter that was issued before these 15-second negotiations. We will evaluate it every quarter, and if the president is unhappy, then they will boomerang back to the 25% tariff rate, both on cars and the rest of their products, he said. And I can tell you that I think at 25, especially on cars, the Japanese economy doesn't work. So once again, more threats. We're going to wreck the Japanese economy the way we wrecked the American economy, unless you, I guess, send us money. And if you do send us money and we say, no, you didn't, then you have to just send the check again. Okay. Ryosei Akazawa, Japan's chief negotiator, said after returning to Tokyo on Thursday that he had, quote, no recollection, unquote, of discussing with U.S. officials what Bessent said on TV. I don't recall having any discussions about how to implement the recent U.S.-Japan agreement or about mechanisms to ensure its implementation, he said, while adding that the two sides can revisit the issue if necessary. The danger is that Trump backtracks on this. Sarachik warns he might argue that if Japan doesn't increase its defense budget by enough or a certain percentage of GDP, then, he connects everything. So I think that's probably the best warning you're going to get on this from the Hudson Institute, believe it or not, where, I think Paul Sarachik has a finger on the pulse here. Is you can look for Trump to say, I'm cutting the tariffs from 25% to 15% and even 12.5% on the cars. But if I don't like the way they're handling defense spending, what can I tell you? It's all connected. It's going back to 25% or maybe 25,000%. We don't know. So, I guess they're taking a stab at it. It's possible that, you make him happy. He looks toward another country to get angry with for a while, and you just breathe a sigh of relief, and you're not the target of his ire at the moment, and that's the best you can do. And thinking that you have a real deal is foolish. It might very well be the case that they don't think they have a real deal. They just said, I think he just wants to put on a show. We should put on the show with him. So, long-term stability. That's cool. Okay, so turning from international trade, we did have to pay some attention to that, to other subjects. More reporting of late on just how impossibly ridiculous the breach of security was in Signalgate. We're still paying attention to that, apparently. The Washington Post has some news, and I guess there's some other Signalgate fallout worth mentioning as well. This one focuses on Pete Hegseth and his signal messaging. The headline, I think, tells you what you need to know about Hegseth, but I'd love to know the details. Hegseth signal messages came from email classified secret, Watchdog told. That's the headline. The revelation contradicts the Trump administration's long-standing claims. It's only a couple of weeks, really, but the longstanding claims that no classified information was shared by the defense secretary's account during the Signalgate scandal. But we all saw what got shared, and we know very well that was classified information. Trump, of course, is plays fast and loose with classified information. He just, of course, he's the believer in instant declassification as long as the president says so. So if he accidentally, or someone he likes accidentally, shares classified information, he's of the opinion that he can say, no, it isn't, and that's the end of the issue. But, I think the news revelation here is that the information that he shared, they now have, I guess, some communication to Hegseth. How did Hegseth get that information? And the answer is it came in a letter or email that was marked, secret, classified. And then he took that information and put it in his signal messages. Case closed, really. But first you got to open the case, and that's not going to happen in this administration. The other fallout was that Mike Waltz, the former congressman who was briefly, as is always the case with Trump, briefly national security advisor to the president, and who got bounced out of that job over Signalgate, is on his way toward confirmation as UN ambassador, which is really an interesting thing and just makes for PR or HR problems throughout the Trump administration, I guess. But, since they're all just toadies, I guess they get used to it. But I'm just sort of wondering what someone like, say, what's her name? Elise Stefanik. She was supposed to be the UN ambassador, and he nominated her, but then, I don't know, they never moved on processing the nomination. Was she nominated and withdrawn or something? Anyway, the margins, the partisan margins between the parties were so narrow in the House that they basically couldn't afford to give her seat away and lose it in a special election, or they'd possibly lose control of the House. So they said, never mind, you got to stay where you are. And she had already given up her leadership positions, right? And they've since, created a fake one for her to make her, to put her, try to restore her to her status quo ante, as they say. But I'm just wondering what she thinks of being replaced, but being replaced by the guy who got fired as national security advisor because he can't keep, national security. That's got to be a bit of a downer, right? Anyway, Mike Waltz is nominated for the job, despite the fact that, again, he got fired for wild breach of national security and being an idiot. So they're going to put him at the UN, which they don't care about. Makes a certain amount of sense for the Trump administration. Just embarrassing for us on the world stage. Anyway, his nomination apparently just the other day was in front of the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, Foreign Relations Committee, Foreign Relations Committee. They use the term. Anyway, it is a 12-10 vote. The committee agreed to report out the recommendation that Waltz be, confirmed in the position, goes to the Senate floor for full Senate confirmation. The bit of controversy about that one was that Rand Paul, the weirdo, who is one of the 12 members on the Republican side, he voted against advancing the nomination. Although he said he would be willing to possibly consider voting to advance the nomination if there was no recommendation made to the Senate. You can report people's nominations out favorably, unfavorably, or with no recommendation. That doesn't really make any big difference. But occasionally, sometimes, you probably find some senators who, whatever, they might ask, why is this person unfavorably recommended? What did he do? Right. Anyway, apparently Rand Paul said he would vote to move the thing forward without recommendation, but he didn't want to put his name to with recommendation, because after all, Signalgate. But Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat of New Hampshire, apparently decided that she was going to go ahead and vote for this report with a favorable disposition and move the thing along, and everyone wondered why.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I was just searching around to see if I could find these clips from Justin Wolfers, which I found, but then I realized once again, I found them on the laptop computer, not the big desktop computer, and so, it becomes a little bit more difficult to move them there, so that I can play them with higher sound quality. I wonder if I can get this one here and make the transfer. But let me see if I can't find a way to just transfer these things over to the larger computer. I did it yesterday and it took a little bit of time, but I felt like this should go on. Oh, look at this. But while I'm here, I'll take a break from going over to Signalgate for just a second, because this gives me is my pencil gone again? I'm going to kill myself over this. Oh my God. All right, here it is. All right, I found it. New Patreon member who I guess found, see, this is a big, I don't know whether this is a big mistake or a great idea, that I added the two new tiers, and I guess that is attracting people's attention. And I don't know. I got to tell you, I am fairly certain that when we set up the Patreon account in the first place, that it asked what tiers do you want to set, and I figured we did like a 5 and a 10 and a 25 or something like that, but now I really honestly, for the life of me, I can't find the other tiers except. So I don't know, maybe there was just sort of and also, by the way, I should point out, when I go onto Patreon, it logs me on and it says, well, here's what it looks like for you because you're the creator. I am the creator. You're the creator of, whose page this is. Or you've created this page and you're the creator of the content or whatever the hell it is you're trying to sell through the Patreon page. And members see something different. And I can switch over to member mode, but it's not the same. I don't see the same pages as somebody who's not me and trying to sign up for my Patreon. It just doesn't display that way. So I'm not entirely clear. Just like I don't know what music is playing during the breaks on the live stream, or what I don't hear that, and I don't see what you see anyway. So now that I've put these tiers up, people are opting for the tiers, which is great because the tiers are higher level of support. So I'm grateful for that. But what I did was, did I mention this yesterday? Maybe the other day, that I put up the one that was at, okay, how about $1 a day, $1 per show? That's about $25 per month. That's great. And then I figured, all right, some people can't, swing that. So I put up the, okay, fine, how about 50 cents thing? But I can't put them in that order. Apparently, I got my answer back from customer support at Patreon. They are always listed from lowest to highest. So, it no longer makes sense that mine now starts with, okay, how about 50 cents a show? And then it goes on to make a pitch for $1 a show. And maybe I'm making a mistake here for even having the 50 cents one. But what I was hoping for is that what they would say is, all right, well, look, I'm asking you for $1 a show, $25 a month. But okay, if you can't swing that, fine. But now it displays like, hey, how about 50 cents a show? Hey, you know what? Now that I have your attention, how about $1 a show? I don't think that works as well as a pitch. But anyway, the good news is that there's several of you out there. It's a slow trickle, but there are several of you out there saying, yes, I will join and I will help. And Glenn Brand is the newest among us to join at one of the fun new tiers. And I guess I should go out there. This now challenges me to add a $100 million a show tier in case I run into anybody like that. But many thanks to all who have joined in. And in just the last, July has been a big month for this, which is fantastic. How many people we got doing something like this in July? We have, I forgot to put down when this one happened. But if we, when did Florida Advocacy join us? You remember when I called that name out? I don't have a date down for that. I try to put the date on, but beyond that, from July 4th on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people have either raised the contributions or joined as new sponsors. So I love it. Fantastic. Thank you so much to all of our July listings so far. And there's still a couple days left in July to join as a new sponsor. So we celebrate all our July people. I'll remind you. Michael William Levine, Laura Kay, Laura Grasso, Larry Handlin, Rebecca Romans, Room 18, Stephen Bradley, Eugene, and Glenn Brand, and maybe Florida Advocacy too. And great, fantastic. I guess the lesson here is speak up and tell people that you want, need, and value their support, and they will come through and offer it to you. I need more of you to do the same. I am continually amazed how many of you are listening, and I appreciate it, because otherwise I'm just crazy sitting in my room talking to no one. And the best way to prove that is to be able to point to this stuff at home and say, look, many people actually want me to continue to do this. So with 1,000 of you listening to the show daily, or just idly downloading it and collecting them for no apparent reason, but if you want to do that and you think they're worth $1, then by all means chip in. But again, I remind you, and as much as I truly and I guess really even, especially appreciate people who are already supporting the show who say, yes, it's worth more to me. I don't know how to do this exactly. To move the rest of you, of the 1,000 people listening, there are 150 or so, give or take here and there, who are actually saying repeatedly, I will be a part of supporting the show, which means that we're, like a little over 10%, which means that a little over 80% are listening to the show and saying, yes, I meant to do that. And we wonder whether the people we're moving to action here in July are a part of that coterie. And if you know anybody who's part of that coterie, you give them a good swift kick and say something. And please join in. These are rough times, and people are losing their jobs left and right for no particular reason, and that has knock-on effects and ripple effects all over the place. Even when we're not working in government employment or government contracting, the entirety of this area is kind of part of that fragile net that's beginning to fall apart, and continuing on into the future depends on your support. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, back to the news, which you seem to enjoy having me tell you so long. Oh, and by the way, an entire time, did I send the Justin Wolfers clip to myself? No, of course not. All right. But maybe that's something I can engineer returning to later on, because we should head on to the Pete Hegseth and Michael Waltz news. And I have to go and find that one too. Mike Waltz, as I mentioned, Jean Shaheen from New Hampshire apparently decided to vote for him. So that resulted in a 12-10 vote in favor of reporting Waltz's nomination to the UN favorably to the full Senate. And people were wondering, what would she do that for? And she had a reason, but it wasn't particularly good, I think. I tried to think of what might be, if not a strategic reason for doing it, then at least the sort of lemonade you might make out of this particular lemon that you'd been handed. But apparently what she thinks she did is secured a promise from the Trump administration, and I guess through Mike Waltz, and this is a UN ambassadorship, so it has something to do with international relations. But apparently she's been a big advocate of, and with good reason, and kudos to her for doing so, being a big advocate of aid to Haiti. And that, of course, has been cut off and frozen by the Trump administration, and she wants to see that flowing again. And I guess she must have said, well, if I vote to, and I think she did an explicit deal like this, if I vote to advance your nomination, can you guarantee me that or can you press to make sure that money goes? I don't know what kind of guarantee she got. It doesn't matter what kind of guarantee she got, because the Trump administration won't honor it, and that's the issue, and that's part of what makes people mad about this stuff. Really, at this point, it should be a hard no on anybody Trump is nominating for any reason. But if you're not willing to stick to that, then at least let's say nobody who's been fired already for breaches of national security from this administration should be recommended favorably at this point. Like, you could lean on that. But, it's... If you think that you're really going to get that foreign aid flowing again, you're probably mistaken. But if you really think that that's going to be the case, then I could see, a good-hearted person saying, well, this was going to happen anyway, because it was. That's worth thinking about. And two, thinking, well, people suffering somewhere in the world will be relieved by this. Not all the suffering in the world, but some, and that's good enough to do something like that. It's a good thing to try to do. But it's only been a couple of days since, for instance, aid to Americans that Lisa Murkowski thought she was being promised was yanked out from underneath her. And you saw that, right, Gene? So it's difficult to believe that you could possibly believe that this was going to result in something. On the other hand, this nomination was going to go forward anyway, or at least him in this job was likely to go forward anyway. It's a 12-10 split on the committee. Rand Paul had said that he just didn't want to do a favorable recommendation for Waltz. So like if Shaheen had stuck to her guns for some reason and said no, and it was, and Rand Paul stuck to his guns, it would have been an 11-11 tie in the committee. And according to committee rules, that's not, it's not a majority. It's a tie, and they don't report out the nomination. Now, that was announced, and it was written up on Blue Sky yesterday. So therefore, it was a 12-10 vote, and Shaheen cast the decisive vote. And I, spaced out for a second there, and I was trying to think of why she might have made this vote. I didn't know about the Haiti deal at that point, but that's that's what was reported and what was on background on that. But I was just sort of following the vote from afar, and then I guess my thought was the decisive vote in a 12-10 vote. Well, wait a second. So on the one hand, voting in the committee is a little bit different than voting like out there, for an election or something. You don't have to show up for an election. So one vote margin is all you need. But in a situation where most people are more or less obligated to vote and either vote yes or no, the vote moves from either an 11-11 tie. It doesn't become 11-10, it becomes 12-10 if you flip and go the opposite direction. But I spaced out for a second, and boy, did everybody go crazy when I was like, well, what does this tell? Why are we saying a 12-10 vote that Shaheen is the decisive vote? Without her vote, it's 11-10. Now, literally without her vote, like if she abstains, and that's what, and then I was like, maybe she didn't, I don't know. Then I started to think she had abstained from this or was absent for the vote in some way, but obviously she showed up and eventually cast that vote. But I wasn't sure whether she flipped to the other side or had been absent but then showed up or whatever. But the plain fact of it is, of course, that, it would have been 11-11, not 12-10, and I spaced out on it. And people, of course, online went crazy for that. Like, you're such a effing moron. You know nothing. Look at the state of American math and civics skills in this country. People were really loving to jump down my throat on that one. But the real point of trying to bring up the switch in votes was, well, why did she do it? Not what the math is. And there's the Haiti deal that was out there, but also I was thinking, well, if you have to make lemonade out of it, this isn't a great reason at all to do this, unless you have some really fantastic plans coordinated for how you're going to make this attack. It does mean that if the nomination advances, it now goes to the floor. That means the full Senate has to vote on this. And with a guy like Mike Waltz, who's been fired for a breach of national security, to bring him back into the national security fold with another job in the administration, do I want to see all 53 Republican senators have to go on record supporting this guy? If I have to, yeah. I mean, if his nomination's going forward one way or the other, then sure, I'd like to see that. Well, do I think it'll swing anybody's election? No. It's just a story for the moment, and you can point to it and say, Donald Trump really sucks, and the people he hires suck, and it doesn't even matter that they suck, because once he has to fire them for effing up national security, he just hires them somewhere else in the same apparatus, really. Anyway, so look how bad he is, and just add that on top of Epstein and outright thievery and lawlessness and insane paramilitary expatriations and renditions and kidnappings on the street. Just another notch, But that's the best thing you can make out of it. Is it a goal? Ordinarily not. Maybe with Mike Waltz, it's possible that you could make a big deal out of it because he was already in the news. But that's it. That's the only reason I could think of to say strategically, you would want to do that, rather than say excusing them from having to take that vote by not reporting the nomination out. But again, in the background, you also need to remember that Rand Paul's objection was just about the recommendation that went with his nomination. He was perfectly willing to move a nomination with no recommendation. Had it ended in an 11-11 tie instead of a 12-10 yes vote, the chairman would have said, all right, suppose I remove the recommendation. Rand, will you then give us your vote? Yes? Okay, all right. So now it's 12-10, no recommendation. Bring that to the floor. In other times, Republican senators would say, no recommendation, I better dig into this and find out why. Not this Republican Senate. They will just say, President Trump wants this guy. Here's the nomination. It's a yes. Maybe Rand Paul votes no. Who knows? But at any rate, that's a reality. Plus, of course, there's also the reality. Suppose they don't. Rand Paul won't move. He won't budge. They're still stuck at 11-11. They can't get a recommendation. They can't report out his nomination. There are ways to discharge the nomination from the committee and put it on the executive calendar. And then there's, of course, the just straight up, well, I'm going to name him interim UN ambassador, or in fact, acting UN ambassador. I'm just going to install him for a limited amount of time, but then I'm going to ignore the limits on the time, as we just saw them do with wackadoodle John Sarcone III in the U.S. Attorney's job in the Northern District of New York, and as in fact we now find has been done exactly the same for Alina Habba in New Jersey. Earlier in the week, when the newspapers were telling us, oh, by the way, the Epstein thing is blowing over, and then we found a week full of Epstein news. We were also told at the beginning of the week, well, Alina Habba's out. She's on her way out the door. They're going to have to find somebody new, and she's leaving behind all sorts of low morale problems in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey. But if that was low morale, wait till you find out what the morale is now that the end of the week has arrived, and they say she's not going anywhere because they're going to do exactly what they did with Sarcone. Well, of course they did. Anyway, all of that has, I can't say little or nothing to do with Pete Hegseth and his situation in the New Washington Post story, because if I said it had nothing to do with it, then the last 20 minutes would have been a huge waste of time. Hegseth's signal messages came from email classified secret, Watchdog told. Who's the watchdog? I don't know. Why don't you tell me? Dan Lamothe and John Hudson at the Washington Post. The Pentagon's independent watchdog, an independent one, has received evidence, who cares, that messages from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's Signal account previewing a U.S. bombing campaign in Yemen were derived from a classified email labeled secret / I love this designation, no foreign. And no foreign people are allowed to see this thing. I don't know what the actual, longhand designation is, but I always see this one. And no foreign looks, of course, a lot like no porn, which is why Mike Johnson is so interested in it, I guess. Anyway, that according to people. Which kind? The kind that are familiar with the matter. The revelation appears to contradict long-standing claims by the Trump administration that no classified information was divulged in unclassified group chats that critics have called a significant security breach. Except, the time that a plane is going to be over enemy territory dropping bombs is classified information. I don't care what you say it is or whether you declassify it later. Everybody knows this. The messages about the bombing campaign posted in at least 2 group chats using the unclassified messaging app Signal are the focus of an inquiry by the Defense Department Inspector General's office requested in April by Republican and Democratic members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Of course, they were going to have to ask that. And by the way, just to clarify, yeah, there are probably some of you out there, because you're good trained listeners, who said, wait a minute, enemy territory, like we're not at war with Yemen. We may be at war with, unofficially, with factions fighting in the Yemeni civil war, and that's true. Okay, so not specifically over enemy territory. That's bad shorthand, but you know where we were. It was Yemen, and anywhere there are American bombers flying with the intent of dropping those bombs on hostile actors, wherever they may be, that location where they're supposed to drop the bombs and the time that they're going to drop the bombs has got to be classified information. The strike plans had been shared in a classified email with more than a dozen defense officials by General Michael Magilla Kurilla. His name is said to be Michael Eric Kurilla. That's interesting. Usually we see him as, what was his, did they go with, I can't remember what a nickname they were using for him. It wasn't Gorilla, I don't think, but Kurilla, what was his, anyway. I like Magilla Kurilla better. That's much more fun. Anyway, it was Magilla Kurilla who shared this information with top defense officials, which is supposed to be okay normally. He's the top commander overseeing U.S. military operations in the Middle East, and then they were posted in the unclassified group chats by an account affiliated with Hegseth on March 15th, shortly before the United States began attacking Houthi militants, the people familiar with the matter said. And now you're a person familiar with the matter at this point. You knew as much as that anyway. But they were relying on insider type experts. Now, the secret classification of Kurilla's email, which has not previously been reported, but come on, effing duh, of course it's secret, denoted that the information was classified at a level at which unauthorized disclosure could be expected to cause serious damage to national security. Of course. The no foreign label means that it was also not meant for anyone who is a foreign national, including senior officials of close allies of the United States. So that's okay. Even people you trust, if they're foreign, no. Now, I don't think that became an issue, I don't think, in the Signal chat, but who knows who else was possibly included in the Signal chat. If the editor of The Atlantic could be anybody. In accordance with government regulations, Kurilla sent his sensitive messages over a classified system, the Secret Internet Protocol Router Network, or I don't know what, SIPRnet, SIPRnet. SIPRnet, probably. 4 people familiar with the matter said, speaking on condition of anonymity to avoid, of course, reprisal by the Trump administration. The only reason that there is an anonymity, even if they keep claiming that it's a different reason. The message included a rundown of strike plans for the day, including when bombing was expected to begin and what kind of aircraft and weapons were to be used. The disclosure of the sensitive information drew both criticism and bewilderment because the group chat inadvertently included a journalist from The Atlantic magazine who is a frequent critic of President Donald Trump, and other reasons. The scandal has caused numerous Democrats and at least one Republican to call for Hegseth's firing, and it dogged the defense secretary through a series of congressional hearings in June. Senior administration officials have repeatedly insisted that no classified information was shared on Signal. So that's wrong. Though national security experts and former top military officials have said it is highly doubtful, and also so have normal Americans who have eyes. Administration officials doubled down on those claims in new statements to the Washington Post, touting actions in the military campaign against the Houthis in Yemen earlier this year and more recent strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. How do they double down on that? Is that to come? Because that isn't in there. The department stands behind its previous statements. No classified information was shared via Signal, says Sean Parnell, Pentagon spokesman, in an emailed statement. As we've said repeatedly, nobody was texting war plans, and the success of the department's recent operations from Operation now they tout. Okay, I see. The successes are supposedly proof that our operational security and discipline are top notch. No, it's proof that the bombs exploded. That's all. And by the way, it also happens to be the case that in the instance of the bombing in Iran, you're lying about the results of it. But that's neither here nor there. Of course, it was classified information, and it's amazing that you stand there and pretend that it wasn't. And I'm also continually fascinated by the manner in which they lie, that they say nobody was texting war plans. Well, of course, the information that was sent were war plans. That was sent, but it wasn't texted. It was posted to a group chat in Signal, which is different than text. It wasn't an SMS message directly from one person to another. No, we deny that 100%. Well, you can stand by that because it wasn't, even if Signal piggybacks on SMS infrastructure. But you get the idea. I'm always amazed when they cling to, a parsed, a split hair there with a plausible explanation of what they're saying. I'm not lying about that. I said they weren't texted, and they weren't. Why do they even bother? Why don't they just outright say no information was shared? No classified information was shared in any way whatsoever. What's the difference between that lie and the lie that it wasn't texted? Everybody knows that that's not true, and that, depending on the legal, I don't know what the definition, the split hair definition of whether it was texted or not is not really the important thing. Anyway, I don't know why they do it. I don't know what they think they gain from it. And especially if they're willing to lie outright, as they frequently do. Anna Kelly, White House spokeswoman, pointed out that the Houthis, a militant group long affiliated with Iran, have since agreed to a ceasefire and criticized the Post for continuing to scrutinize what happened in the Signal affair. Look, we got the Houthis to agree to a ceasefire, so what's the difference that we're, disclosing classified information left and right? I don't know, other than suppose something else had gone differently, and instead of having a ceasefire, the Houthis had killed everybody who had come to execute the attack. Would we then say that it was bad? No, somehow. Anyway, so let's see. Then there's an attack on everybody else. Kelly says, it's shameful that the Washington Post continues to publish unverified articles based on alleged emails that haven't personally reviewed in an effort to, so lying again about what happened here. What can I tell you? So the apparent creator of the main signal group at issue, former White House National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, was ousted from his job less than 2 months after the episode was revealed in March. Numerous top administration officials were also part of that group chat. J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Tulsi Gabbard. Waltz is now, of course, Trump's nominee to be U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. But he came under criticism last week during his confirmation hearing for refusing to concede the unclassified group chat was a mistake. And yet his nomination goes forward, and I guess we're supposed to thank Jeanne Shaheen for that one. Bringing it all back together. All right, so let's see. There's some other comments from other committee members about how terrible Waltz is. I can review those during the 1 minute break to see whether it's worth returning to, or whether it's worth returning at all. To hell with it. It's Friday. Maybe I'll just leave. No, I'll be back. See you in a minute. All righty. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. Where else are you going to be in the first thing in the morning, right? Okay. I should check in one day with Justice. Every once in a while, I remember to check in. One of the metrics I also don't see is how many people are listening to the live stream versus downloading podcasts later. And every time I ask, I think we find out that, it's not a huge number, but I've seen up to 100 or so reported listening live, which is remarkable. And I assume that it's, East Coast heavy for the live stream, just because it's a little early in the morning, West Coast, but you never know. Curious, and it's also difficult to include those numbers sometimes in who's supporting through Patreon, or there are, and by the way, other ways of doing things. PayPal actually works, and if you're one of those folks who just says, I've had a PayPal account for 100 years and I just don't want anything new, you can absolutely do it. And in every one of our daily posts over at Daily Kos announcing that the show is coming up, and every one of Scott's summaries that's posted there, there's a link to something we rigged up so that you could join in the support of the show on a monthly basis, a recurring monthly basis via PayPal. And of course, if that's something you just can't do, and you want to make either a one-time contribution or do it all at once and pay it all up front, we have a couple of very generous folks who have done that. And as a matter of fact, we can thank him for his annual patronage, David Paquette, who's supported us for several years in a row this way and just prefers to get it all done at once, which is fantastic and always fun. And so, by the way, I'll also say that we've had a couple of solutions, and we've mentioned them in the past. Some people have said, well, can I just send you a check? Yes, Sure, go ahead. That's always welcome. But here we run into the problem of new sponsors coming on and saying, or new listeners saying, you know what, it's time for me to support you, but I don't want to deal with any of these crazy online payment services for whatever reason. Can I just send you a check? And then it occurs to me, I'd love that, but I don't have like a mailing address that's, securely shields my home address. You know what I'm saying? I'm not that big a business concern, and it doesn't make any sense to maintain a mailbox like that because very few people prefer to support the show that way. And the expense would eat up all of their contributions, essentially. And then it's like, well, I appreciate the sentiment. And of course, somebody who's a big supporter of the show, presumably not looking to come to my house and, let's say spray paint on the front door.
Bald asshole.
Right, like that. And it wouldn't even be accurate, but you could perhaps do that on my garage door the way it happened to Larry David, whatever. We don't want that happening. But as it turns out, there's an easy way to get around that. And I wish I could remember offhand now who came up with the brilliant idea, and I probably could find it and credit them again. And we'll see whether I can, in fact, find that. But I did get the great suggestion that if you wanted to email a check, there we go, John. Thanks, John. John Stafford, who had sent me the suggestion and said, here's what you do. Now that you can deposit checks on a mobile app for most banks, right? You end up, someone sends you a paper check, you endorse it, and then you take a picture in the banking app, take a picture of the check and both sides, and then you submit it. Well, we can do something similar here. If the person wants to send you a check but doesn't want to mail the check to you, or you don't want them to have to mail it, or you don't want them to know the address, whatever it is, they can write the check, take the picture, preferably on a black background to make things nice and clear and crisp and sharp. Take a picture of your own check and email that picture of the check to me. The email address I'm perfectly willing to give out, and of course, you might even be able to guess it. It's since it's a Kagro in the Morning show. I should have just a Kagro in the Morning at Gmail account probably. But it's the Kagro in the Morning show because the old handle that I still use on social media and elsewhere, KagroX, KaGroX, no spaces, nothing like that in the email address, kagrox@gmail.com. So you can, of course, contact me about the show there, and if you want, you can write a nice support check monthly. As I will put up with the chore of depositing those checks monthly if you want to do it that way, or all at once, or just one time, whatever it may be. Take a picture of that check, email it to me. Don't worry about the reverse of the check. That was the other part of John's cool trick here, is if I keep a photo of an endorsed check reverse, the back of a check, I can submit that right along with the picture of the front of your check, and the bank doesn't care, and it works just fine. We actually tested it. It works. It doesn't make any sense for you to send me the picture of the back of the check anyway, because then I would have to print it out, sign it, take a picture of that, and then send that. So it's an extra step that just isn't necessary. And the bank recognizes, yeah, you could just do that, but what's the point? And it's done. So that's it. So if you're one of those people who's like, I would do it, except I'm not getting involved with any of those stupid online services. Well, you have to be able to get involved with one of the stupid online email services. If you're not doing that, though, I don't know how you're listening to this show, because we're online. So you definitely have a computer. Is email secure enough to do something like that? I guess you got issues with it, but I don't know. I guess it's possible if somebody knows and breaks into the email, because if I have a constant flow of gigantic checks, it might be worth someone's time to hack into my email. But as that is not the case, I wouldn't worry too much about it. So far, we've had 2 or 3 people do it, and it's been, incident free so far anyway. But if I become a national security advisor, then then it won't be necessary anyway, and it'll probably be illegal for you to send me checks. Not that there's a law against that anymore. Anyway, thank you to everybody. thanks to everybody who's going through this effort and trying to support the show. Now I will return to telling you the news that you came here to hear, or at least are agreeing to stay to hear. This might not have been what you thought you were going to get. So, Pete Hegseth, there's more to this article, and there's a considerable amount of it. What happened that I thought was worth sharing? Not the White House spokespeople saying, the Washington Post is a rag, we hate you for reporting this news. That's not interesting. What about the comments of members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about the idea that Mike Waltz was being bounced out of the national security advisor job for inability to execute national security functions properly, but still being rewarded with a job in the administration, and an important one at that? Well, Chris Coons commented, I was hoping to hear from you, Mike, that you had some sense of regret over sharing what was very sensitive, timely information about a military strike on a commercially available app. We both know Signal is not an appropriate and secure means of communicating highly sensitive information. True. Did he get the personal regret? No. And just noting for you, here's Chris Coons tiptoeing around this. I don't know if it was definitely classified. It was definitely classified. Definitely. But since it's in dispute, instead he says, well, it was very sensitive, timely information and highly sensitive information in this second instance here, in which he mentions it, as opposed to just saying, come on. If it wasn't literally classified information, it should have been. So I don't care who declassified it when. Where a bomber is flying and what it's carrying and where it's going to drop it at what time is information that if you share it as the national security advisor, you're fired and you can't be hired as UN ambassador. I mean, you can and you will, but you're not supposed to be able to. Waltz, who like Hegseth served as an Army officer before entering politics, also insisted that, quote, no classified information was shared. And of course, the point of this article is, yes, classified information was shared. You just lied in your confirmation hearing, but your nomination's moving forward nonetheless. And if anything, that will just make you more angry at Jean Shaheen. Even if the aid arrives in Haiti, as other people were pointing out, the impoundment of the aid for Haiti is illegal. And the administration should be forced to do that through the courts, if nothing else. But since the courts aren't actually enforcing that and show no interest in enforcing it, I don't really have any reason to believe that he's going to honor his agreement with Shaheen. But maybe it happens. Is that an even trade for letting Waltz go forward? Nobody can make that call. You can be angry about the call that other people made, and justifiably so, but, I don't know what to tell you. Even if the aid doesn't go through because the administration screws her over, then you can say, well, that's clearly a bad deal, but was it a good attempt? I don't know. Maybe. But in the meantime, let's focus on what's here about the comments about Waltz and Hegseth. At a House Armed Services Committee hearing in June, Hegseth, under questioning from Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, refused to say whether the Yemen strike details, later shared on Signal, initially came to his office over a classified system. How interesting. I refuse to say. The answer is yes. And the answer was yes. You knew it when he refused to say it, that the answer was yes. That's why he was refusing to say it. But now you have, the proof, so to speak. The open event was not an appropriate venue to address such questions, Hegseth argued. I can't tell you in open session whether or not I was given this information over a classified system. You can. They know you have a classified system. It's not going to tip off anybody to the existence of a classified system for communicating with the defense secretary. I think they assume that's already in place. Okay, it was just you trying to, not say, yes, I'm guilty of a crime, though you were guilty of that crime. Moulton, a Marine Corps veteran, disputed that. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified, the congressman said. And in fact, the DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. If it was illegal to say that something is classified, then how would you classify anything? That is a little dumb. Moulton pressed Hegseth on whether he was trying to assert that the information he received from Kurilla's headquarters was unclassified. Hegseth dodged. I'm not trying to say anything, Hegseth responded. What he really means is, I'm trying not to say anything. And that's certainly true. The Defense Department Inspector General's office declined to comment and has a general policy of not commenting on open cases. Its review, the findings of which are expected to be released within a few months, poses another threat to Hegseth, whose 6-month tenure as Defense Secretary has been marked by infighting and dysfunction, including the firing of numerous senior military officials and political appointees on Hegseth's own team, and abrupt voluntary departures by others. Oh, I got news on that one. Government regulations allow for the Defense Secretary to declassify and downgrade classified information produced by the Pentagon, but the Trump administration has yet to claim that such a process was carried out before the sensitive information was shared over Signal. Two people familiar with the evidence the Inspector General's office is reviewing said they were aware of no such discussion having occurred before the scandal erupted. That, of course, yeah. So that's what about the attempt to say I declassified it even after the fact? So that's why I say no classified information was shared. They're not even actually making that claim. They could, and they may have no basis to do so, but they could make the claim as a lie and just see how it goes, but they haven't even bothered to do that. NBC News reported in April on the transfer of information from Kurilla's message to the Signal chats, while the Wall Street Journal reported in May that the Inspector General was scrutinizing one group chat that included cabinet officials and another that included Hegseth's wife, Jennifer, his brother, Phil, his personal attorney, Tim Parlatore, etc., etc. Jennifer Hegseth has no official role in the Pentagon, while Phil Hegseth, has worked as liaison on matters pertaining to the Department of Homeland Security, and Parlatore serves as part-time military aide in addition to being Hegseth's personal lawyer. Part of the emphasis of the Inspector General's review will be to establish who posted messages that may have been classified in the group chat under Hegseth's name. Oh, is he claiming I didn't do it? Someone used my account? Please. In addition to the Defense Secretary, Marine Corps Colonel Ricky Buria. Remember him? He's the news I had. Then a military aide to Hegseth had access to his personal phone and sometimes posted information on his behalf, officials familiar with the matter said. Individuals interviewed by the Inspector General said Buria told colleagues that he typed the controversial Yemen texts into Hegseth's phone. Oh. People familiar with the matter said Buria has not spoken publicly about the matter and did not immediately respond to a request for comment. So either he's agreeing to try to take the fall somehow for Hegseth, or he really did, in fact, do this, which would be amazing that a active duty officer in the Marine Corps thought, you know what would be a great idea to put in Signal chat? The attack coordinates and timing. Oh, wow. Well, it would be hard to believe, but he seems to be willing to say it. Such information before an operation would generally always be classified to protect the U.S. troops involved. And of course, again, it was classified. We now have the communication from Kurilla to Hegseth that shows that it was classified. So don't need to speculate. Well, anyway, retired Admiral William McRaven, a Navy SEAL officer who oversaw the raid that killed Al-Qaeda mastermind Osama bin Laden, said in April that Hegseth's team has not handled the controversy well, and that clearly the information broadcast on Signal was classified. And you have to believe him because Obama. I don't know. Oh, I mean Osama. Yeah, Obama killing Osama. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, it's good. They're all guilty of treason. Anyway, I guess you're supposed to believe the guy because I love the way we invoke this mythology, right? Sure, he's a retired admiral. Yes, okay, that really should be reason enough to understand it's classified. But I didn't even need an admiral to tell me that. Of course it's classified. But this is no regular admiral. He's a Navy SEAL. Oh, everybody's supposed to, hooray, Navy SEALs. All right, sure. Not only just a Navy SEAL that was actually involved in the one thing that most people came to learn of the existence of Navy SEALs when they heard the news of, which was the killing of Osama bin Laden by Obama, which was treason or something. Again, we're back at this again. U.S. troops at all ranks are instructed on how to handle classified information. Service members have faced disciplinary action on numerous occasions for not doing so correctly, sometimes at courts martial. And by the way, sometimes when it's clearly a mistake or just dopey or, there was some doubt about things. Plus, of course, just straight up espionage. Could be anything. It doesn't really matter what it was. It just matters that it did happen. Buria abruptly submitted retirement paperwork in April and has since become a de facto chief of staff to Hegseth, a political position. He frequently appears at the defense secretary's side. Trump and Hegseth recently authorized Buria to retire from the Marines as a colonel. Remember, he was just listed that way as a Marine colonel, bypassing federal law stating that in most cases, a military officer of his standing must serve at least 3 years at a rank to retire with it. That's the news that I had about Buria, but an observation about that news in a minute. First, the last paragraph of the piece. Exceptions can be granted with a waiver, the law states, in cases, quote, involving extreme hardship or exceptional or unusual circumstances. People familiar with the issue said such waivers are rare and typically reserved for difficult situations, such as a service member needing treatment for cancer or another serious illness. Right? That's the reason that they would do something like this. By the way, if he doesn't retire as a colonel, a full colonel, he can retire, I guess, as a lieutenant colonel, which I assume was his rank beforehand, but I forget exactly what the story on Ricky Buria was. But he definitely had an officer's rank, and they temporarily bumped him up to colonel, as you may recall, so that it didn't look funny that he was serving at this high-ranking position as an assistant to Hegseth, and other people who were already in positions working with Hegseth's office who outranked Buria didn't want to take instructions from him. And they thought, well, if he's a full colonel, then they'll feel more comfortable taking the instructions. But in fact, they felt less comfortable taking instructions because everybody knew that he had been, insta-colonelized there. And anyway, so then now he's had to retire quickly so that he can take the political position with Hegseth. And he says, well, I've been a colonel for 15 minutes. I want to retire as a colonel. And the law says no, but the law does say that can be waived. But usually the waivers are for, well, if somebody needs to retire at full colonel so that they can have the retirement benefits that will enable them to afford cancer treatment. Sure, fine. But if it's just, I just want it, probably not. Now, they granted the waiver because it's within their power to do so, even though, the norms say don't do it this way. That's true. But screw all of that, right? Is basically the Trump approach to things. So Brandon Friedman had said the other day, let me go find his account. And where am I going to search this? All right, let's see. I remember what he said, so let's see if I can find the post from it was a couple of days ago, but it had a phrase in it that'll help it stand out. But I don't know how frequently people use this phrase. Yeah, here we go. Now I know I can find it. Okay, so this is 2 days ago. Posting a screen cap of the Washington Post's reporting on the Buria story. Trump intervenes to boost Hegseth aide who left military for politics. That's the headline. And then the subheader says, a waiver granted by the president allows Ricky Buria, top advisor to the defense secretary, to bypass federal law and depart the Marine Corps at a rank he held only briefly. If I had more time, I would read you that story, but I'll send you the link to it along with Brandon's post here, because Brandon says, in all caps, and rightly so, again, the note, the waiver allows him to depart the Marine Corps at a rank he held only briefly, and we're reminded, OMG, this is what they criticized Tim Walz for, not Mike Waltz and his breach of national security, but they criticized Tim Walz during the election. Remember that he was a reserve officer and he left at the rank that he was serving at and took retirement so that he could then enter politics and run for office. But he served 20-something years in the reserves, et cetera, et cetera. But they insisted that this was somehow illegal or at least some sort of chicanery, and they accused him of stolen valor. That terrible phrase that he's not a real officer of whatever rank it was that he left the reserves. He's claiming a higher rank than he's really entitled to. This is stolen valor when Tim Walz does it. But when Ricky Buria does it, it's nothing. It's no big deal. It's honorable, in fact, and everybody stand up and salute Colonel Buria. Just pointing that out. I think that's a good observation, and well done. All right. In fact, he's posted on it twice. He also says, I've worked in politics for years and can tolerate a high degree of hypocrisy, but this makes me want to pull my hair out. And 2 screen caps here. The first from Politico. Pelosi hits back at Republicans, quote, stolen valor attacks on Walz. The former House Speaker says the Harris-Walz campaign should just dismiss criticisms. And then another piece here, I guess, or another screenshot from that piece describing what happened to Tim Walz when he did this. Harris's presidential campaign did an update on its online biography of Walz amid questions about his military service and axed a reference to Walz as a, quote, retired command sergeant major, Politico reported, instead now saying he once served as command sergeant major. They had to reword the whole thing in the face of accusations of stolen valor, but, when they do it, no biggie, apparently. Oops, I closed that one, and I probably shouldn't have. I guess I can't back out of that. All right, well, anyway, I just thought that was interesting, and I'm glad I got around to that and remembered the weird stolen valor claims, because that was a good point from Brandon, and I didn't know whether I'd be able to shoehorn that in. Okay, wow, moving on. Let's see, what else? I got to scan. I still have to get used to the way this Instapaper displays. It probably doesn't display not that many less stories at any given time than the tiling system of Pocket did. And I took a look again at that other, Raindrop, that also does tiling. But I don't know. It's just not quite the same. I got to get used to all of this. But let's see. Definitely a lot of other items here, and I don't know, this one. Okay, all right, here's some other random items here that I thought might be of some interest. This is good stuff for Friday. This news out of Oklahoma, where the lunatic education secretary, Ryan Walters, has been conducting his weirdo MAGA campaign for all this time. And this time, the Substack of the Friendly Atheist, who will make the friendly suggestion that you move from Substack to one of the other platforms or something, as we sometimes do. Textbook publishers are largely rejecting Ryan Walters' MAGA curriculum in Oklahoma. We've definitely reported on the fact that he's trying to impose this, and guess what? He's having some difficulty doing it, which is great. Ryan Walters' far-right curriculum changes are getting snubbed by publishers who refuse to rewrite history. This is a July 23rd entry over at the Friendly Atheist. It appears that the biggest textbook publishers in the country are effectively ignoring Oklahoma's Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ryan Walters' push to turn social studies classes into labs to indoctrinate children with right-wing propaganda. All right. What's happening? Walters released those standards in December, got the state's Board of Education to approve them in February without telling them that he had made even more controversial changes to them. That does seem odd. And the Republican legislature, which had the power to block them, chose to ignore the problem in May. The revised standards are set to go into effect next month when school resumes, though 2 lawsuits have been filed to put a stop to that, and both are currently in the hands of the Oklahoma Supreme Court. What's so controversial? Walters was demanding that teachers tell kids that the 2020 election had major, quote, discrepancies. It did not. That there were security risks with mail-in ballots and sudden batch dumps. No, there were not. And that COVID originated in a Chinese lab. There's no conclusive proof of that. Here, a screenshot of most of that stuff. And some of the other suggested topics of discussion for the social studies curriculum include things like explain the effects of the Trump tax cuts child tax credit, border enforcement efforts, including Title 42 and Remain in Mexico policy, consumer and business confidence, interest rates and inflation rates prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. What? Really? Things like identify discrepancies in the 2020 election results by looking at graphs and other information, including the sudden halting of ballot counting in select cities and key battleground states. You get the idea. This stuff really doesn't belong in a generalized history or social studies class in high school. Not that you can't have it in a contemporary issues in the news type class, but then at least present it like, okay, this was claimed. Let's evaluate that. But of course, a MAGA guy isn't going to do that. Students would not be required, however, to learn about things like George Floyd's death or the Black Lives Matter movement. In fact, it'd probably be prohibited to teach them about it. Publishers aren't having it. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think we'll probably jump back out of that story, although I'm just very interested in the fact that the textbook publishers are not interested. There's some very egregious examples of the kind of dumb things that he wanted to teach in there, and the article is well worth reviewing. There's, let's see, things like second graders would be taught stories from Christianity that influenced the American colonists, founders, and culture, including the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, e.g. the Golden Rule and the Sermon on the Mount. That's your second grade curriculum. And of course, let's see, there's eighth graders who would have to evaluate the role of Judeo-Christian ideals in supporting colonial demands for independence, as exemplified by the Bible being a frequently cited authority by America's founders. Notes here, spoiler, it wasn't a frequently cited authority, so a bit problematic for a history class. Anyway, lots of examples. And then the State Textbook Committee in Oklahoma is currently sifting through those books in order to make recommendations to school districts throughout the state. It's a long process that's set to end in November after school is well underway, but that stamp of approval from the committee matters. The legislature has $33 million available for districts who purchase items that the committee has greenlit. If the districts want to purchase textbooks the committee has not approved, they have to find other ways to pay for them. And remember, I think all of this started with Walters insisting that he wanted them to approve the purchase of Trump Bibles, not any Bibles, Trump Bibles for Oklahoma classrooms. How did he do it? He used a very good old legislative trick. You don't actually say that, because then people will point to that and say, that's ridiculous. We could only buy Trump Bibles. No, I'm saying you can buy any Bible that also happens to have the United States Constitution and Declaration of Independence printed in it. That's I just want to save money on textbooks. I don't want to buy 3 books, 1 Constitution, 1 Declaration, and 1 Bible. I want a 3-in-1 deal, and there happens to be one on the market, and there's only one, and it's the Trump Bible. but, wink, wink, go ahead and do it. Anyway, turns out that, let's see, what did the textbook committee say about it? Were they okay with it, but the publishers say no? I'm just sort of interested here. According to Oklahoma Watch's Jennifer Palmer, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, one of the largest textbook publishers in the country, didn't even submit materials this time around, so they're not even looking to get into the Oklahoma market. They've been basically written off Oklahoma as a lost cause. So their approach to it is, no, we won't change our textbooks, certainly not at Oklahoma's demand. And two, well, what does that mean? What if you're not allowed to sell textbooks in Oklahoma if that's the case? Well, F it. Who cares? We're just not doing it. Oh, okay. Two smaller publishers also opted out because they knew their books would have been rejected because they included facts, as the guy says here, and they didn't want the black mark on their resumes. So nobody wants to print an Oklahoma-only version, even if it was practical financially to do so. They don't want to be the company that changes truth at the drop of a hat, right? Because no one else will trust their other textbooks. Among the companies that did provide books, they're doing the bare minimum to adhere to some of Walter's standards without spreading his lies. This is interesting. Where does this grab come from? I don't know, but it's delineated here as a quote. Regarding the 2020 election, for example, an advanced placement textbook titled By the People, A History of the United States, published by Pearson, I don't know whether that's the person or the publishing company, Pearson, Pearson, makes no mention of sudden batch dumps or mail-in ballot concerns. It states the Trump campaign submitted a total of 63 lawsuits claiming voter fraud, but none of them, including several that reached the Supreme Court, resulted in a finding for the campaign. At least that's true. Another textbook for high school students, this one published by Cengage and titled America Through the Lens, addresses claims of election frauds with this. Supporters of his claim believed that mail-in balloting was not secure and alleged that ballot counting was halted in key battleground states, accompanied by sudden batch dumps of unfavorable votes. With an unforeseen record number of votes in the election, determining the final vote count was challenging. Investigations by numerous states and federal authorities determined that there was no credible evidence to support such a claim. However, an online version of the book for Oklahoma is different. The same section instead reads, he claimed the 2020 election had been stolen through widespread fraud, even though numerous state and federal authorities determined there was no credible evidence to support such a claim. Well, it's still not what Walters wants, and that's good. Then there's this one from McGraw-Hill textbook titled United States History. As mail-in balloting began, stories appeared in the media describing mail-in ballots being lost or found dumped, people receiving ballots for someone else, ballots being filled out for people who had passed away, people accepting payments in exchange for their ballots, and people being charged with election fraud. These stories were anecdotes, personal stories, and they did not prove there were widespread problems. And a note here, that I guess was in the original. The word anecdotes is in bold in the actual textbook. Okay. That McGraw-Hill textbook also says COVID originated in Wuhan, but doesn't say anything about a Chinese lab. What about the Bible? Only one publisher included it in a curriculum for elementary students. There was a mention of David and Goliath, but even that retelling was preceded by the line, the Hebrews told stories. The Ten Commandments are also mentioned in that curriculum, but only in a descriptive sense, not suggesting that people ought to follow them or that they form the basis of our current laws. In short, the companies that publish textbooks aren't playing along. At best, some of them give educators the option of editing the online versions of the textbook in case they want to include additional material. All right. It's possible the state textbook committee, consisting of 13 members, 12 of whom are appointed by the governor and not Ryan Walters, approves some of this material anyway and just leaves it to the districts to fill in the blanks. That may be their only option. While adhering to the state standards is important, the textbooks don't have to align perfectly for the committee to approve them. And if by chance some right-wing groups like PragerU submit material that perfectly aligns with Walter's wishes, districts won't be obligated to use it even if the committee does greenlight it. Okay, that's of interest too. So, okay, there's a bit more. And you might be interested, especially if you are in Oklahoma or if you anticipate having such a battle in your own state, just sort of bringing you up to date on what's happening there, and a story we reported some time ago that you might want some follow-up on. It doesn't necessarily make it happen, even when a MAGA elected official says we're going to do it. They can't always strong-arm their way through to it. Okay. Oh, wow. Is this it? Okay, great. Let's see. Do I have access to, I guess one of the problems with parking these things is if they have video, I can't always get them. Instagram on the big computer is posing a problem for some reason. But is this the thing I was thinking about? Yeah, it was. Now, why did I had this video that I thought was kind of astonishing and wanted to share with you. But now that I think about it, I think I had a follow-up somewhere. Now I got to try and find that by scrolling further back in Instagram. But where did Sam Altman from OpenAI came up at some point, and I was like, oh, I should play this crazy remark that he made, and I don't know whether I can find this remark or something. I don't know. Now I can't remember what reminded me that we needed to use it. But I guess now at least I'll play this thing. I don't know whether I made mention of this or not, but did I not send this thing? Where did this go? All right. Let me send it to myself. So Sam Altman from OpenAI addressing a investors conference of some kind. And man, I cannot remember the other thing that made me say, I got to go back and play this. But this will stand in its own right. So is there any further context in this video? Warren Terra on Blue Sky found this thing. Where? I don't know why, but here's Sam Altman saying, and seriously, telling a room full of venture capitalists with a straight face and apparently quite honestly that, what are your plans for AI? Right? Oh, yes. Now I remember. This was a comment that I had. Okay. All right. This is straightening it out. So now I can look back in Instagram. I had put aside something that I said the other day. Let me see if I can find. I know this is great. Scintillating, I'm sure, in terms of radio content. But there's Sam Altman again. And this time, this is a couple days later, Sam Altman, OpenAI CEO, saying the world may be on the precipice of a, quote, fraud crisis because of how artificial intelligence could enable bad actors to impersonate other people. And we keep running into such stories. And in fact, there's one still buried somewhere in Instapaper. I think we told the story of somebody impersonating, was it? I can't remember. But using AI to impersonate people, both as in phone calls and then in some cases in written communications. And yes, it's true. But besides deep fake video, etc., they keep using AI in creative new ways to defraud people or impersonate officials and try and get something done or get something to happen based on essentially a forged communication. And so it was interesting to see Altman saying, we're on the precipice of this fraud crisis. And, I'm sure most people's eyebrows went up and said, well, I think the entirety of AI, for the most part, is a fraud to begin with. The fraud crisis is you guys keep building these super data centers that ruin the planet. And I guess for what reason, we don't even know, but it enables people to draw pictures with 7 fingers on them. What's the point of all of this? And you begin to wonder, and they keep slapping AI into everything, or now that's the hot thing to say, we want you to subscribe to this thing and or buy this product. And guess what? It's got AI, so it's definitely worth it. And, we're still at the stage in the awakening about what AI actually is, that people are like, oh, that's like super advanced. I definitely want that. But increasingly, people are also coming to the realization that it's crap and it's just giving me garbage answers. I don't want you to include AI in my search engine. I don't want you to install AI on board of my dishwasher, anything like that. Meanwhile, same guy a couple of days earlier, if you're looking for a fraud or you're worried about fraud crisis, let's keep one eye on impersonation of officials or business people or anybody for that matter through AI. What about the fraud of just investing in AI at all in the first place? This is, let's keep in mind that the claims being made here for him, the reason he's supposed to be an important guy is he's the head of this company, and the company is important because people are investing money in it. People may now be questioning this. Now, thank God there are people in the room that laugh at this, but I got to assure you, he does this with a straight face. I don't know whether he's on the spectrum somewhere and he's just not sensitive to he doesn't express on his face what he's truly thinking. That's one excuse. Otherwise, if it's dead serious, then what are we doing here? Ready for this one? He's basically, I guess, being asked the question by the venture capitalists in the room. You want us to invest in like the next generation of AI, the super AI, the one that's really going to become artificially intelligent in the way we understand it in the science fiction sense. You want my money. Let me ask you this. Suppose you create a computer that can think like a human. What are we going to do to make money out of that? Well, how will I get my money back? How will I make money? And well, that's a good question. And I mean, that would be a fine answer. But listen to Sam Altman actually answering this question.
We have no current plans to make revenue. We have no idea how we may one day generate revenue. We have made a soft promise to investors that once we've built this sort of generally intelligent system, basically we will ask it to figure out a way to generate an investment return for you.
Now, there's laughter in the room. There was laughter in the room when I played it the first time. You may be laughing in your room. He's not. He's not smiling. He's not rolling his eyes. It's nothing. That's the plan. Now, some people walked out of that room and wrote him a check, which is amazing. But again, we're going to design a computer so smart that even though we don't have any idea how we're going to generate revenue with it, the computer will be so smart we'll ask the computer to generate the revenue for us. In fact, at this point, you can just say, I want you to invent a cryptocurrency, and I want you to find a way. Why not ask this question? I want you to find a way to convince the world that this is a valuable commodity and that it's already worth $1 million per coin, even though the people who invested in it only paid 1 cent per coin. And if it's a super intelligent, it'll just invent that and it will convince everybody, I guess. And then that's, I don't know what to tell you about the idea that, and what a stark admission too. I was kind of like, well, that's really pretty frank with everybody right up front, right?
We have no current plans to make revenue.
That's usually true for a lot of things. That was the case when people were investing in Uber, in DoorDash, and everything. We have no plans to make revenue, but here's my money anyway. Yeah, well, we think you'll eventually make it.
We have no idea how we may one day generate revenue.
Now that's difficult to swallow, right? Usually you want to have some idea. And then of course the idea being the only idea they've got is, well, eventually if you give us enough money and we totally succeed in building a general artificial intelligence, then we'll ask it. That's no good, right? But what about the fraud crisis? Well, I think you're seeing the fraud crisis right here. Now, a couple of days later, Sam Altman, in this video that I played you, he's in a black T-shirt telling everybody this because he's a cool guy. Now, a couple days later, he's in a suit and tie with an American flag behind him because he's somewhere else. I don't know. He's talking to, policymakers. Watch out for the fraud crisis. You don't want any frauds like, we don't know how we're going to make revenue. We're going to ask a computer how to make revenue, and it'll be okay because you guys are sophisticated investors and there's no way for me to dupe you according to securities law. So give me your money. But anyway, talking to policymakers, we're going to have a fraud crisis because how artificial intelligence could enable bad actors to impersonate other people, like competent CEOs, for instance, and asking for, I don't know. But I have just come up with the solution for how to avoid the fraud crisis, right? And you're already working on it. When these guys in the other room give you their money, despite the fact that they're laughing in your face, literally, you will still get that money. I don't know how that happens. It just does. And this, to circle back to the fundraising issue here, the reason we need this program to be a success, not just to keep it running, but to prove the principle, if there is one, that something is more valuable than nothing. But unfortunately, the truth is that the nothing is usually more valuable. This guy is going to say to people, I don't know how we're going to generate revenue. I have no ideas about how to find out how to generate revenue, although that's a lie. I do have an idea. I will take your money and I will use it to build a machine that is so smart that I will ask it, how can I make the money that these people gave me back plus interest? And it will give me the answer. Now, other people in the comments of this thing, by the way, you're going to build this thing and it's going to cost $17 trillion and it's going to say 42 at the end, right? Just like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's it. You're literally building that, that machine, the planet Earth in the books. What's the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything? And the answer is, I don't know. I'm going to ask the computer. Anyway, how do you prevent the fraud crisis? Duh. Same solution. You're already working on it. Build a super AI and ask it how to avoid the fraud crisis. Now, I've said it, and I'm waiting for my first couple $1 billion to roll in. But I was wondering if we could just roll in $1 a show instead. Is there any way that in a world where Sam Altman can stand up there and say, if you give me money, I'll build a machine to ask the question of how to get your money back, and it works? Some of the people in there did not laugh. Some of the people in there laughed and gave him money anyway. You were just kidding, or I don't know, you're such a genius, it might work anyway. All right, I don't know. People do that. What about I'm actually producing something that you're enjoying and you've been enjoying it for years without paying for it, and maybe you could change your mind and pay for it now? Can't that work? I don't know. We'll see. But at any rate, now that we have the solution for everything, right? I don't know how to solve the problem of this. I don't know how to solve the problem of that. You name it, you pick the problem. I will build the super intelligence, and then when we're done, we'll ask it how to do it. All you need to do is give me all your money now and evaporate all the water on the planet. It should work out. I can't promise anything, but I'm saying somebody is raising a significant amount of money, like billions of dollars, on this premise. And, I just need 25 is what I'm saying. Okay. Now, let's see. Why don't we move on here to some of the other. Oh, yes. Speaking of all of this AI impersonation nonsense. Here it is. This is the one that I was thinking of. Let's throw this one in there. I think we can finish this one. The Hill reported on the 22nd, just a couple of days ago. Al Weaver and Brett Samuels teaming up for this. The headline, Trump world duped. I know. Trump world duped by fake Jerome Powell resignation letter. And I guess at this point, now if I had an assistant here at my hand, I would say, look up for me, give me that video and get it on the big computer of Jerome Powell having his disagreement with Donald Trump yesterday about the cost overruns at the Fed. It's interesting, but it's not a world-shattering bit. Anyway, Trump world duped by fake Jerome Powell resignation letter just the other day. We're on the verge of a fraud crisis. Trump world was roiled momentarily on Tuesday after a fake resignation letter purportedly penned by Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell started to make the rounds of high-profile MAGA social media accounts after weeks of speculation about his future. United States Senator Mike Lee, based Mike Lee, for God's sake, and controversial personality Benny Johnson were among those who shared the letter. It's easy to get duped these days, I must admit, which said Powell was set to resign at the close of business on Tuesday. Both quickly deleted their posts. There appeared to be one, and it occurred to me seconds after I posted it that I hadn't seen it anywhere else, so I deleted it out of an abundance of caution, Lee told The Hill while leaving the Senate GOP luncheon minutes after posting and deleting the letter from his account. I don't know whether it's legit or not, he added. Okay, fair enough. The letter featured a number of typos, for one thing, and the Federal Reserve seal was illegible and appeared to be generated by artificial intelligence. Illegible meaning it's not that the individual letters were not discernible because of low resolution, but rather that when you looked at it, it clearly was. The reason they also think it was artificially generated by artificial intelligence is, it gave gobbledygook mishmash of letters that from a distance kind of looks like it says Federal Reserve, but actually doesn't. You get the idea. Trump has for months berated Powell and complained about the Federal Reserve's decision not to lower interest rates. The president polled a group of House Republicans last week at the White House on whether he should fire Powell, but has in recent days indicated he's inclined to let him serve the remainder of his term, which expires in May of 2026. Then he makes a mumble face quote, who cares really what it says. Meanwhile, top White House officials have zeroed in on a $2.5 billion renovation of the Federal Reserve's Washington offices to ramp up scrutiny on Powell. Those officials, which included Deputy Chief of Staff James Blair and Budget Chief Russell Vought, have sidestepped questions about whether their probe of the costs is intended as a predicate for firing Powell. Lee has been known to play fast and loose with his based Mike Lee feed at times. Last year, he fell for a fake death announcement regarding former President Carter last July. Carter eventually did, of course, die in December. So eventually I'll be right. Oh, speaking of which, yes, more celebrity deaths. Hulk Hogan. No, I don't, there you go. I don't care. As a kid, I was like, hey, Hulk Hogan, he's a famous guy from the wrestling, and sometimes I watch it. So some people have a greater attachment to Hulk Hogan. And of course, he was connected in the end to Peter Thiel and his weird lawsuit, which resulted in the end of the Gawker sites at the time, or at least destruction of the then existing Gawker sites because of some defamation suits, as I recall. Anyway, there you have it. More fraud crisis. Sam Altman is certainly correct about that, although he's also part of the fraud crisis. And yeah, you can fake resignation letters. And in this day and age, who knows what it means? Like, suppose Trump had been duped and announced to the world that he was out and he didn't have to fire him. And then they just decided to roll with it and prove that I'm wrong. It's going to take you years in court to prove it. Could things get to that stage? I guess it's pretty easy to imagine. All right, let's see. Just a few minutes left here, and why don't I throw this one in here as well? Since we were talking about classified documents and the various problems that the Trump folks have always had with them, I'll give you this piece from the Florida Bulldog. Trump aide, key witness in DOJ's, once upon a time, Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. Not only did they all get away with it, of course, because all the charges were dismissed once Trump took over the DOJ, but it turns out that, what's her name here? Is it Molly Michael, who was a Trump aide in the first administration and then went with him to Mar-a-Lago and had something to do with, and she was the one in the room, I think, when they were talking about, I have the Iran plans and waving them around, right? Anyway, turns out she's had a soft landing. $310,000 in pay this year from the Republican National Committee, says Dan Christensen of the Florida Bulldog. Here's the setup. A company owned by a Lake Worth Beach woman who was Donald Trump's executive assistant in the White House and later reportedly a key government witness in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case against him before it was abandoned, has been paid more than $310,000 a year this year by the Republican National Committee. Federal Election Commission records show the RNC paid the money to 1600 Collective LLC to purchase donor mementos in 8 disbursements between March 12th and June 11th. That's a pretty short time. Florida corporate records list Molly A. Michael, 32 years of age, as the sole owner and authorized member of the company. Her husband, Aaron Michael, who quit his job in May, as it turns out, as project manager for FP&L, I think that's Florida Power and Light maybe, lists himself as co-owner in his LinkedIn page, even though the official documents don't say anything about that. What are we saying here? Long story short, because we're kind of running out of time here, is that basically she stood by. She was a key witness. She could have essentially provided, if she had testified truthfully, testimony about being inside that meeting when Trump was waving around papers saying these are the plans for attacking Iran, which we've now done, by the way. I'd like to take a look back at those, except now we can't because, the case has disappeared somehow. Anyway, what does she get in exchange for keeping her mouth shut? The opportunity to sell to the RNC doodads and gewgaws that they give away to big donors. And she's supposed, I'm way late on our exit music here. Apologies to Justice Putnam, waiting for his chance to get on the air. But what's happening here, just to quickly sum up, you sell the trinkets that they give away to big donors, and you have the exclusive contract. And, I don't know, we'll buy some things. We may or may not give them to anybody. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But what can I tell you? As chairman of the RNC, I, Lara Trump, hereby instruct the RNC to give a gigantic sum of money, enough for her husband to retire too, both of them 30. He quits his job, and instead the deal is, I give you trinkets to give to donors. Do you give them to the donors? I don't know. Do I give you the trinkets? I don't know. But the contract says you do, and I'm getting paid $310,000. We said in a year, but of course it's all from, what was it? March, and from March through June. It's $100,000 a month, basically, to say I'm giving you trinkets to give to other people. These must be a hell of a trinket. I'm going to read a little bit more of this probably over the weekend, see if it's a storyline we want to dive down one day. Maybe another Friday or something like that. Something to think about over the weekend. Just a little extra variety besides Jeffery Epstein. But by the way, I do want to say at this point, Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam to tell you about Jeffrey Epstein next.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Okay, there might be more than Jeffrey Epstein even on his menu. For instance, Ghislaine Maxwell. She's not Jeffrey Epstein. Well, she never testified in her own criminal trial, so what did Todd Blanche offer her to make her suddenly decide that she was safe with him? That's the big question on everybody's mind, except ours, of course. We ignored it because we knew justice would cover it. We'll see you next week.